Legal practitioner, Africa's largest private art collector, grand donor and chairman of Council, Yemisi Shila Museum of Art, and also the grand patron, SNA, Ogun State Chapter. It is another day to talk about visual art, and today we are taking a close look at the relationship between visual art and poetry, as we are being joined by a poet. His name is Eriata Iribabo. He's a poet, a Rotarian, an essayist, an editor, a senior citizen, a social commentator, a literary activist, publisher, and so many portfolios attached to his name. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. This is an opportunity. I'm not going to take it for granted anyway at all.
It's so good to have you. Now, this our topic is one of a kind, because is there really a relationship between poetry and visual art? Well, then we have you on the program today to tell us the relationship there is to visual art and poetry.
Thank you. First and foremost, I have to appreciate the sponsor of this program, who have deemed it fit for art to be promoted on TV, as it were. And to specifically have poetry into this program means the broad view we have about the art, as it were. The relationship, straightforwardly, is creativity. The one that is doing a painting, the one that is having a sculptural work, the one that is having photography, they are all inspired by creativity. And that creativity is the backbone of everything. So there's this interconnected relationship that is between poetry and all forms of art. Like we used to say, poetry is in fact an elevated form of inspiration where people get connected and do a lot. So if you have the one that is a painter, the one that is a photographer, the one that is a sculptural artist, poetry runs along all of them, because the poet will come to interpret it in his own way, even though every work of art is subject to subjective interpretation by whoever is connecting with that artwork. So I think that is the connection I would want to say. There is always a connection, the connection of creativity. And creativity is everything. It's like a blood that runs around all the art forms together. Yeah.
Since we're looking at the relationship between visual art and poetry, I think it's only fair we talk about or touch a little on poetry, especially poetry in Nigeria. You know, when people hear poetry, they just want to, their mind runs straight to something musical, something lyrical, something that has to do with talking. I just want you to take us on the basis of poetry, and then we can still break it down, because you said there is a connection, and first the connection is with the creativity between visual art and poetry. But let's build a foundation for poetry for our viewers watching right now.
Yeah, poetry, the foundation you get for poetry starts from the vocal, from the presentation that was not even written, oral tradition, where poetry is brought to the people, even on the street and the marketplace and everywhere, even the palaces of the royal fathers of those days, and even till now. But when we begin to talk about poetry, as it were right now, you're talking about written and the spoken word poetry. You talk about the reading of poetry, as it were. Well, you see, all these coming together, people will want to get connected with poetry, like you said, from the spoken word aspect, which actually was the beginning of poetry, from the oral tradition. So poetry is creativity at its best. You talk about that basics that everybody want to connect with poetry. So right now you see a lot of activities coming up over our space, people promoting spoken word poetry, because the musical part, the lyrical and all those presentations that you just mentioned are capable of first attracting people to the craft. Because generally people believe that poetry is something that people who see poetry see it as something that you cannot connect with in any way. It's so abstract to them. They see it as bland. So what you see when you have all these events around poetry, people begin to see it as lovable, as something they can connect with. And that's why in Poets in Nigeria we do more of the written, the spoken word, and all the presentations around poetry to bring life to words. Yesterday
I saw this particular advertisement on screen, and it was different for me because I've never seen anything like that before. What made it outstanding was that they adopted the poetry form of advert, and it was done through spoken words.
Thank you.
Yes, and it kind of opened the beauty of poetry.
And giving a new life to advertisement.
Yes, I never saw poetry being exhibited that way before until yesterday, and it was beautiful, especially the artist, the poetry.
The poet.
Yeah, the poets. I beg your pardon. You know, she embodied the words. It was commanding, and that's one thing that I like about poetry. You know, there's this thing that is so convincing. When you hear people say it, they try to visualize this thing when the poet is saying this thing, and it kind of sinks down a lot for people that listen.
Thank you, because you know, art, as it were, is provided or is created for consumption, and it is better when shared. If you have an artwork that you kept somewhere, nobody sees that artwork, then it means that you have not really spoken to the community, as it were, not spoken to the world. And that's why you see people come around on tours. They go to museums, they go to places where they can connect with artworks. I'm talking about sculptural works as well. Same for books, because you see that the artist, the poet, is also a very great artist who paints his own imaginations, his emotions, his experiences in words. So when you bring those words out in a spoken word level, it's another level entirely. And that's why most big blue chip companies that appreciate creativity, that appreciate poetry, they are beginning to connect with poets to see how they can rebrand and get a better space in the eyes of the audience.
I'm trying to picture the relationship between a poet and a visual artist. I sort of feel like the poets speak this story into reality, and then a visual artist creates something physical.
Yeah.
Am I correct with this explanation?
And the book itself is also physical. The book is like a canvas. The artist has its own canvas, where he has done a lot of maybe abstract work or whatever. The book itself is like the canvas to the poet, where the poet writes everything and expects you to connect with it and make your own interpretation.
Just like a visual artist
does. As a visual artist,
okay.
Yeah. And so you just look at the whole relationship with this creativity. This person has done his work in this form. It could be through adire, somebody just does some kind of artwork.
Textile.
As long as you connect with it visually. You also connect with the book visually. The book will come these days of digital, the digital world, as it were. You see a lot of artworks, a lot of poetry coming out, even in form of a photograph with the wordings inside these artworks. What does that mean? It means that art, as it were, are all connected in various ways. Yeah, because we just have to connect with the art. Every attempt to make that poetry to be more pleasing to the audience, that's what poets are now doing. You understand what I'm saying? And even in Poets in Nigeria, we do photography, poetry connection, where you do a competition, and it's an initiative of Poets in Nigeria, where we bring out a photograph and we now ask people to look at it and interpret it in their own way, bringing it out in poetic form. And everyone will interpret that photograph in his own way because it's subjective. Meanwhile, the poet who had written something about that photograph may not even know that he has already helped the owner of that photograph or that picture to really interpret his own work in diverse ways. In a
case where a person doubles as a poet and a visual artist, what do you see of such scenario in the world of art?
I see a connection of value, because the artist who did a job for you there and a poet is having an edge over the someone who just did a work of art, because he can go to a great extent in even interpreting it in poetic form, which the other visual artist might be needing somebody to say, look, can you interpret what I've just done? Do you get me?
Yes.
And that's why you see that music as an art form, you discover that musicians, check out musicians that are poetic. They are great in their own right. Two-Face Idibia, speaking in pidgin or even the regular English, check his music. You see a lot of poetic interpretations, a lot of poetic infusions in his artwork. Of course. So that is it. That is what we're talking about.
Let me quickly remind our viewers they can join in on the conversation. The topic today is the relationship between visual art and poetry. A lot of us do not see that coming. Guest on the program today who told us and is still telling us the relationship varies to poetry and visual art. You can call us and ask our guest question pertaining our topic of conversation. If you have any question or you have contribution, all you need to do is call us. When you do so, please turn down the volume of your TV set, and when you do that, we are able to listen to you clearly. You can also reach us via our social media handles. World of Art is streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. Do well to send in your messages, and the rest assured we will get them and talk about it on the program. Now, this is on a very lighter note. We're talking about poetry, and for a lot of Nigerians, the first contacts or connection we have with poetry was first
the oral.
The oral, yes, from the primary school days,
yes,
where we have oh my and then we have
even predicting that from the traditional homes. Talk of the Orikis, the Yoruba, and all those chant poetry.
Do you think these are deliberate efforts by institution to help the society understand the importance of poetry in our everyday lives? Because I know a lot of Nigerians can relate to this, you know, from primary school, and just like you said, those who had this traditional setting, there was just some sort of connection with poetry. Yes, in our society.
Yeah, the question you just asked is that the poetry as an art form, I mean, has always been there. And it's highly regarded by the royals in those days, to the extent that the poet in society is as important as you can imagine it. They are given their places, and that's why when over time we begin to lose the connection between the way we used to do things in schools. A lot of schools now, you can't find some schools reading literature. An entire school, you might not even have a literature teacher. It's terrible. So how do you connect with the past when you don't have the people that are going to impact this to the schools?
That's a very important question you raised there. And let me also still remind our viewers that they can call in on the program today. This program is brought to you by Prince Yemisi Shilon, legal practitioner, Africa's largest private art collector, grand donor and chairman of Council, Yemisi Shilon Museum of Art. It's World of Art. This is where we bring you all the discussions of art and the importance to our everyday lives. Now, I want to paint a picture for you, and just for you to still break down the relationship there is to poetry and visual art. So I saw this very funny picture, not funny as per se, but because when it comes to art, there's always a meaning. And in the picture, there is some sort of knife connected to the person's head, and the head was stuck to a wall, and it felt like this could never happen in real life. And then there was a caption that said, "Over to you, poets." What does this mean? Because obviously someone has drawn a painting, has made a painting, or drew something very creative out of human imagination.
Correct.
But there is need for an interpreter. There is need for someone to tell us, oh, this is what this means. And there've been a lot of pictures like that where people see images that they can't interpret, and they had to employ the help of a poet.
Okay.
So let's talk about that.
Okay. Poets in Nigeria, we have one of the largest literary group on Facebook, poetry promotion group on Facebook, called the Poets in Nigeria Initiative Group, with over 80-something thousand. We see that almost every day. People come up with very funny pictures, and they'll say, "Over to you," like you just said. Poets will write all they feel, and of course, like I said earlier, you interpret it subjectively. Everyone has an interpretation to give. But you also know that in these days of AI, very many funny pictures come up, images come up,
that's true,
where people can just do anything they want to do. Sometimes they also bring that to create fun, also bring that just to excite the creative ability of people. So sometimes you can even have it as a photo for competition. In our group, sometimes we discover that such photos even attract more comments than the poem itself. People will just make all their funny comments, but it might not be poetic. And that's why we have a photography poetry competition where we bring out specific photographs and ask people to write poetry. Sometimes we even team it and say people should write their poems about that particular photograph. So the relationship is always there. There will always be that relationship. The
relationship is always there. I do agree. It's been there for years, but not a lot of persons are aware of that relationship.
I agree with you. Not a lot of persons are aware. Some people are musicians. They just think they do music. While those who do music and also have this knowledge about poetry, they come out sparkling better than others. They can interpret their music, not bang, bang, bang type of music that you see every year. Check out the music of, I mentioned Two-Face initially. Any Obanke is also a poet. You see what he does. A lot of all these musicians that have relationship, that have the background of poetry, creative art. You discover that they stand out from others. They may not be very popular in terms of money making in a commercial world that we have here, but those who know what it takes to bring out what they have put out there, they give it to them. Their music always stands out for generations.
I think they are also very much appreciated in, let's say, the Western world, because I've seen a lot of scenarios where people, amazing poets, young poets, are flown outside the country for one opportunity or the other, and they just keep representing the country really good. And I could say the same for the international poets that I have seen. They're doing really amazingly well. Now, I want you to come back a little bit to one of the things you mentioned when we started this conversation. You said poetry could be written and it could be spoken words.
First and foremost, it will be written.
Okay.
It will be read. It will be performed. In those days we talk about...
So when you talk about, sorry to cut you short, when you talk about written, it could be in books.
Of course, it could be in books. In these days of digital world, you see poems all over the places on the internet, but not all of them will pass the test of true poetic presentations. But what do? You accept all of them because you believe that the platform is already there for people to promote their craft, to promote what they are doing, and so you give them the space.
All right, we'll come back to that, but let's take these questions from our viewers. Femi is asking all the way from Lagos, how does one become a poet? And then we have this question from Damilola, all the way from Ibadan. How can one publish his or her books as a poet? And then how profitable is poetry in Nigeria? That's coming from Yemi, all the way from Ocean. So let's start with
one
how do you become a poet? Do you just wake up to the inspiration? Do you need to learn it? Is it studied in school?
Yeah, I think the answer to that question, in my opinion, is that there's a poet in everyone. There's that poet in everybody. But the relationship, people you relate with sometimes will help you discover the poet in you. I sometimes advise that if you love poetry or you love what you see what poets are doing and you're interested in being part of the family of poets, and endeavor to attend poetry events. Some people that I know today never thought they were writing poetry until their attention was drawn to the fact that they were writing poems. So the creativity is there, but you need to connect with like minds who will begin to help you bring out that creativity in you. You cannot just come up today and say you want to be a poet when you don't even know that what you are writing is a poem or it has relationship with poetry. So that's why you see that creation of literary events, different activities, even this program that is being held today now, will serve as an inspiration to a lot of people who never even knew that poetry has anything to do with the visual art. But poets themselves, they're also producing things for the visuals.
True.
So, and they may not even have taken it as anything. They just believe that they saw it online, people do something like this, they like it, they want to also do the same thing.
So how do you know that what you are doing is poem? Because you made mention of something that you might be doing something and you think it's poem, but it's not. How do you know? What are those factors that makes whatever creativity you have there a poem?
Yeah, because poetry has to have the ingredients of poetry. The rhyme, the reading, the imageries that you create while writing your poems. Okay. These are all areas, ingredients of poetry. You might not be consigned to rhyme. You might not be consigned to do it this way. But as long as it contains those ingredients, then it's going to be called a poem.
You are, do we call you an author of poems? Or what?
I'm a writer, I'm an author.
Writer, okay, great. You're a writer of a lot of poems, and there are a lot of books here that, you know, different story poems. I wish we had the time to talk about this poem. But
popular that we see every day. I'm a publisher myself, but I'm not going to be using this program to advertise myself. But there are a lot of publishers all over the places. If you Google, you'll be able to get publishers within Lagos. If you join some literary organizations, you'll be able to know some poets. And I think publishing is easy. Even online now, you can also do your own publication, but don't publish what has not been edited. You have to also look for good editors. Most popular writers may not be editors of poetry. Poetry has its own editors. You have poets that can edit poetry. It's not just any writer that just come and say, because I'm a writer, I want to edit your poem. Poetry is not about the language you speak there, but it has to be in an elevated form.
Thank you so much for coming on the program today. It's just been an amazing time having you discuss the importance of the relationship between poetry and visual art. And I trust our viewers right now gather one or two things for themselves. Again, thank you for coming on the program today.
It's an opportunity. I thank you so much. Thank you very much.
This is how far we can go on World of Art this week. I trust you've been able to gather one or two things for yourself. The topic on the program today is the relationship between poetry and visual art. My name is Miriam Usman. This program is brought to you by Prince Yemisi Shillong, legal practitioner, Africa's largest private art collector, grand donor and chairman of Council Yemisi Shillong Museum of Art, and also the grand patron for SNA Ogun State Chapter. I'll see you next week where I bring you another guest and another topic. Until then, please do take care of yourself. Bye for now.